אפשר כבר לבקש מתנות קטנות.
Yay! Hi everyone, welcome. I'll wave to you with my big rubber hand too. Welcome and Chag Sameach, Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach, Happy Independence Day, all the greetings. Thank you so much for joining me today. Still got people coming in the waiting room, so I'm gonna give it maybe another moment or so. But I'm so happy. First of all, I'm so happy to finally be doing a happy Zoom with you guys. Over the last few days, actually over the last few weeks, it has been, I would say, a little bit more solemn and a little bit heavier topics, as you all know, but that is Israel for you, right? We go from sadness to happiness very quickly. It's part of our history, it's part of our heritage, and that's what we do. So, what is? Oh, I can still hear your music, Shy. Okay, I wasn't sure if I'm hearing it. So I'm gonna let more people in. So as you can see from all the emails that we were sending you and from the music at the beginning, we are going to be talking about Israeli music today. And as you can see, take things very seriously when it comes to celebrating Israel and to celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut. Yeah, exactly. If you need, I have many flags. So I just will say about all these things, I was very lucky to be able to actually get these things from Israel. I brought a whole bunch of stuff with me in my suitcase. As when you know that you're going on shlichut, you know several months in advance. So I was just collecting as much as I could. And the moment that Yom Ha'atzmaut came around in Israel, I just got everything and brought it with me in my suitcase. These string of flags you always get from the bank for some reason. The bank always gives you a gift on Yom Ha'atzmaut and you get a string of flags. I grabbed that from my parents. People have flags on their cars. It really is like the whole country just turns blue and white. The whole country puts flags up weeks in advance and it really is festive and just so patriotic, really. Okay, so I think we can begin. First of all, I'm very proud to introduce my dear friend, Shy Ashkenazi. Yay, everyone clap.
Unnecessary, but thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hi. As I said, I'm Shy Ashkenazi. I'm a shaliach myself in Northern Virginia at the Poses JCC, and I'm very happy to be here tonight to join Talia in this journey through music of the 73 years of Israel.
I will also say, full disclosure, Shy and I go way back. We also work together as shlichim and as working in the Jewish agency for about 10 years now. And I'm so proud, so proud that he's my friend, but so proud that we are shlichim together still, and that he's my neighbor as well. I think I keep joking, but I really was serious. When I signed the contract to come to the DC area, I was like, okay, if Shai's in Virginia, I'm signing. So not only is he a shaliach and has been working alongside me for many years, he is also a wonderfully talented musician as well. So of course, when I knew that I was doing a music session, I immediately asked Shai if he would join me, because who better than a musician himself to join me in this thing? So we are going to share with you a brief history of the music of Israel. Of course, there's so much that we could talk about. So we kind of chose a few things that we felt were interesting, a few things along the way, different types and different genres through the ages. And we hope that you find it as interesting and as fun as we do, because I think we love a lot of these things. So Shai, you're going to share your screen. Yay.
Yay. Yes. So we're going to go on a journey of, music of Israel through the ages, through 73 years. We're going to share the songs, the sounds, but also you're going to have the lyrics of the songs on the screen so you can follow in Hebrew and in English and transliterated. So we're covered on all bases, just for you. We're going to start our journey in 1948 as with the establishment of the state of Israel with a song called Ruti. Before I play you this song and you can listen to the music, a little bit of background that's going to take us throughout this presentation that Israel and the establishment of Israel was done mostly by an Ashkenazi European hegemony of European Jews. So, with the establishment of the state of Israel, the music, the culture, everything was based on European culture, mostly Eastern European. And the next song that we're going to hear is actually a Russian melody, which was very, very common in the late 40s, early 50s in the establishment of the state, to take those Russian tunes and bring them to life, re-bring them to life with Hebrew lyrics. This song that was written by Chaim Guri, Ruti, actually was the anthem of the Paliyam, Plugat Yam, sort of the navy of the underground movement Palmach, that tells a love story of those sailors of the Palmach. And let's have a taste of this song with the wonderful voice of Arik Einstein.
לי כל גן עושה מזכרת מן הבית מן החוף מן העצים יפי צמרת וזהה שלכת בת חלוף מן העצים יפי צמרת וזהה שלכת בת חלוף אם נסעי ספינה ושוטי מה רבים הכיסופים לי נערה יש ושמרותי המצפה ואלה החופים לי נערה יש ושמרותי המצפה ואלה החופים.
We're going to pause here because we have so much music to bring you that we cannot cover listening to all of the songs. But this is the beginning of our journey through from 1948 when this song came to life, a bit earlier than that even. And we're going to stop at our next station. And to you, Talia.
Yeah, okay. So if you look at this picture, you may recognize what we're looking at, but if you don't, let me clue you in. So this is a picture of a lehaka tzva'it, which means the army band. These, of course, are singers and musicians that were in the army, and their main job was to go and entertain the troops. I'm sure you know of such things in the American army as well. It's not something the Israeli army has invented, but their main goal, of course, was to lift the spirits and lift the morale of the soldiers, and I guess kind of also to distract them from the fact that they're fighting wars, but it's all meant to in good fun and in good spirits for the soldiers themselves. So something you should know about the lehakot tzva'iyot in Israel is that they were so popular, they really got to like the height of their popularity in the 60s and 70s, sort of between the 6-Day War and the Yom Kippur War, and they were considered Israel's most popular and most famous stars. A lot of them rose from these military bands, and they were like the biggest pop stars. And it's amazing to think that they actually started in military bands. So some very famous artists that you may know from these bands, Arik Einstein, Gidi Gov, Yoram Gaon, Shlomo Artzi. There's lots of people that you wouldn't think nowadays that they got started when they were 18 and young, green soldiers, literally as well in their uniform. The song that we're going to be talking about is Prachim Bakaneh. Prachim Bakaneh means flowers in the barrel. And as you can see from the words, this is a song that really is meant to give optimism. It's something that Dudu Barak wrote in 1970, and it was fairly just after the Six-Day War. And the hope from this song is, let's give hope. Let's look forward to a time of peace. And maybe one day we won't have to use the barrels of a tank as weapons, but the barrels for flowers, something that will be hopeful and beautiful. So really that is I would say the main thing coming out of this song is the optimism and the hope that they were feeling at the time. And let's listen to the song now a little bit. First of all, fun fact about this song. First of all, this was sung by no? Okay. So this was sung by Chel HaTotchanim, which is the artillery corps. And actually, the soloist, Judith Schwartz, fun fact was that she was sick at the time that she recorded this song. And famously, because of that, she kind of raised her voice to get over her croaky or huskiness. And that has famously become like the iconic thing of this song, is that there's always like the chorus is always, you have to raise your voice or even shout a little bit. And a lot of Israelis, when they sing it, that's what they do, is they kind of shout it out in the chorus. So I think that's kind of funny that that's why it started. But also, this is basically, as I said, the military bands were the start of all these pop culture icons. And I think it's really cool that everyone knows these songs, even though they started out in the army. And just, I have to, if it's okay to share what someone just wrote to me in the chat, that someone's, I'm not gonna say who if you don't want me to, but first cousin was a singer in the army. Oh, okay. So Diana said her first cousin was a singer in the army. His name is Yuval Dor, and he was in a famous Israeli band called Hakol Over Habibi. And Shai, I'm sure, also knows this, but Hakol Over Habibi was with Shlomit Aaron, and that's amazing that he was part of that band, and started out also in Lakat Tzva'it. That's so cool, and thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, I think actually, I know that Yuval and Shlavit were actually married, and they did not, they went to Eurovision representing Israel. Here, let me, okay, there, get rid of my granddaughter. For a minute, I thought she looked cute with her little Yom Ha'atzmaut t-shirt. But anyway, they went to Eurovision. I know they didn't win, but I think they maybe placed third or something like that. So, and yeah, Shlamit still is quite active with the three tenors and still sings. She was in Renana a few years ago.
Yeah.
Singing on Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Thank you so much, Diana. That's really cool.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
We're in the presence of, stardom now.
Exactly. No, but I didn't know that so many of these groups started in the army. I thought they were so unusual, but apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice to know.
So yeah, definitely started in the army and then paved the way for many to come. And I will just add one thing about, sorry, I'm going to say this after this song. Just remembered we have another slide after this.
Okay, so a little bit about Shir LaShalom and Leakat HaNachal, the Nachal group, one of the biggest star makers in the military bands, sang the song that became sort of a, the Let the Sunshine In of Israel, and was a bit controversial because in 1969, when it came out, he talked about those people who were lost in the wars, and while Israel was in this euphoria after the 6-Day War, so it wasn't accepted, wasn't a popular song to be accepted during that time. Years after, when Yitzhak Rabin stepped on the stage on November 4th, 1995, he actually sang the song with Miri Aloni, who we're going to see singing it here, who originally sang the song in Leakat HaNachal, and they sang it together moments before the assassination. So anyone who was born after 1995 in Israel actually associates this song that was written and was let out years and years before that, associates this song with the fight for peace of Yitzhak Rabin and his assassination. So Shir LaShalom, this video is taken from a celebration for the military bands way back in the 70s. Let's enjoy it. Okay, I'm pausing here just to show you this fine gentleman with the mustache there is also a graduate of Leakat HaNachal. You might know him as Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. This is Chaim Topol. If we mention the big stars So this celebration that he was the MC for was also there.
And I will also say that even if you knew the song before the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, it is definitely these days 100% associated with it. And as kids growing up in Israel, there are always ceremonies for a memorial, and the ceremony for Yitzhak Rabin most probably would have that song sung by different kids. And as a kid that would always be singing in these things, I usually would be the one singing it. But definitely you would, that's what you would associate it with these days. So we mentioned some of the stars that came from the Lahakot Tzvayot. Does anyone recognize who these are or what the band is?
I will just say I call them the Beatles of Israel. That's
Definitely.
In that case, it's Sipurei Pugi. Lahakat Kaveret.
Yay! Thank you, Rabbi Weinblatt. Yes, and you can see Gidi Gov as a very young man. And he also got his start out in Lahakot Tzvayot. And you may have also seen him in the film Halehaka, that then came out also describing the behind the scenes intrigue of the military bands. So yeah, Kaveret definitely looked the part as that time and looked a little like the Beatles. And then a modern look at Lahakot Tzvayot and how they may look now. You may know this young lady, you may not, but this is a very famous singer in Israel called Noah Kirel. She has lots of pop songs out on the radio in Israel these days. And this is interesting, actually, how nowadays it's kind of shifted and changed a little direction. So if in the past, Gidi Gov and Shlomo Artzi and Arik Einstein would get their start in the Lahakat Tzva'it and then become famous and become stars, and everyone knows, Gidi Gov and Arik Einstein later on. Here, something different happens. So nowadays, there are very famous talents, we call them, because they're not just singers. They sing, they dance, they act, they do kids shows and all these things. And they start out at really young ages. As you may know, kind of like Britney Spears, Justin Bieber. She started out, I think she was about 15 when she started, maybe 14 even. And because she was so famous at such a young age, when she became 18, it's her turn to join the army. And where else would she go if not Lahakat Tzva'it and become a singer in the army? So that's fairly interesting that now it kind of works the other way around, and you're first famous, and then you can go into the Lahakat Tzva'it and be in a military band. And then you even have special permissions to keep your record deal and to go and keep performing around Israel. So I think that's pretty cool that they still give you like star quality when you're in the army.
Absolutely. So we talked about the early years of Israel, very beginning. We talked about those stars, and Lahakot Tzvayot actually came to a pause in 1978 when Chief of Staff Rafael Eitan decided that there's no need for them anymore, just a waste of personnel. And then they were reassigned in 1986, but they were never the same as they were before. We now move to a little different thing. You might recognize this symbol, not necessarily from Israel, but from the United States. Can anyone share what this symbol stands for?
Black Power.
Black Power, or specifically, thank you, David, specifically the Black Panthers. If we're talking about the 60s Black Panthers, in Israel, in the 70s, I mentioned at the beginning that the establishment of the state was by the European Jews, by the Ashkenazi Jews. In the 70s, after mass immigration, after the establishment of the state of Israel, mass immigration of Mizrahi Jews, Jews from Arab origins, from the Middle East, from North Africa, about 800,000 Jewish people came from those countries or were pushed out from those countries and were absorbed in the new state that was not really prepared for them. And they were they felt underprivileged, they were a bit underprivileged, and they created the Israeli Black Panthers, who were the Mizrahi Jews, who it started in Musrara neighborhood in Jerusalem, a neighboring neighborhood to Rechavia. Rechavia is where the prime minister's residence is, the president's residence is, a lot of professors from the Hebrew University lived there, and right across from this neighborhood, you had a tiny neighborhood named Musrara that did not have the same sewage system, water running, electricity, and had mostly Mizrahi Jews. And they came up and said, we are fighting for our rights as Jewish people and citizens in this Jewish state as Black Panthers. And this comes with a lot of tension between Mizrahi Jews and the hegemony of Ashkenazis, which brings us to talk a little bit about a huge portion of his Israeli music, which is the Mizrahi music that became very influential.
Okay, so some of you may recognize this song, and if not the song, then you may recognize the singer, Zohar Argov. So Zohar Argov is a legend when it comes to Israeli music, and specifically to Mizrahi music. He was such an icon that people even call him the king. And he actually made history because in 1982, he won the festival, the song festival. It was actually the Mizrahi Song Festival, but because he won, it actually opened up this opportunity for other people to hear the song. It used to be a very niche market, something that only Mizrahi Jews would listen to. And suddenly his winning with this song was so spread all over Israel. Maybe not everyone heard it, but suddenly more and more people had been exposed to this type of music. And Zohar Argov, I feel that, everyone knows him these days. He is really such a classic icon in that genre. But what was special also about his way of singing is that he was so influenced, and so were a lot of other Mizrahi singers. He was influenced, of course, by Arab music. And you can hear that really in the opening of this song, where his whole opening is with silsulim, which is like, what's the word for it?
Musical trills, we call it, or specifically this one is a ma'awal. It's called a ma'awal, a Yemenite sort of musical trill.
Right. So he was, of course, influenced. His family came from Yemen. He was influenced by Arab music, and you can hear that in the tempo of the song. You can hear it in the opening of the song, and I think we'll let you hear it to know what we're talking about.
ברוכים למנצח מ"ב. ועכשיו מבט אל לוח אני.
Wonderful. What's very interesting for me in this, first of all, we hear the trumpets at the opening as well, which is mostly more of a Spanish influence in a way. And Mizrahi music, as Talia said, is influenced by Arab music, but also all of Mediterranean basin countries, Greece, Spain, a little bit of Italy. So it was brought together, and now we know Mizrahi music mostly as Mediterranean music in Israel. Because it has all these different influences, and we can hear his pronunciation with the het, that usually we say chet, and ayn, with that emphasizing the ayn that comes from the Yemenite accent that he had.
I will also add just a personal story that our mutual friend Avia shared with me last year. So she's another shlicha, a friend who's a shlicha in New Hampshire. And apparently you can see her mother in this clip. Her mother was one of Zohar Argov's backup dancers. And she grew up in a home where Zohar Argov wasn't just this king and icon of music, but he was a real person that she knew of. And the funny thing was, her mother later on had a flower shop, and she decided to call her flower shop Haperach Begani, the flower in my garden, after this song. So I just thought that was such a cute anecdote that, you know, she was a backup dancer for him and her flower shop was named after the song.
Now, we talked about the rise of those stars from the military bands, but as Talia said before, Mizrahi music was such a niche. It was not played on mainstream radio, only in certain times, only in certain shows. And the rise of those stars, like Zohar Argov and many others, came from these cassettes. A lot of cassette stands, mostly in central bus stations or markets, because cassettes were cheaper to produce in recording studios, were the way that people consumed the Mizrahi music. And from there, slowly the radio station realized that there are so many people listening to those songs, and they brought them into the radio. So basically, starting as grassroots from the people, it made it to the radio station. So we see a different form of how stars were made in Israel way back in the 80s, through the cassettes to the radio stations, where a lot of times the radio stations decided who's going to be, you know, they were the kingmakers. They decided who's going to be played, and then the people were exposed to the music. So that's another different story of how people became stars in Israel. And this is just a small example. Now, Mizrahi music or Mediterranean music is in the top of the charts for years now. Top earning singers, musicians, top in all the charts, yearly charts and weekly charts. And this is a small example of Eyal Golan, who is one of the biggest stars since the 90s, Sarit Haddad as well, Omer Adam, who sold out for every performance, Moshe Peretz and Eden Ben Zaken, and so many more are huge stars, some of the biggest stars in Israel in general, but mostly from the Mizrahi music section, let's call it. And now we're going to move and talk a little bit about peace in Israel. We as much as we would love to talk about Israeli culture and not talk about wars or conflict, is something that almost is inevitable. And this specific song, I used to love this song as a little kid without really realizing what it talks about. Uzi Chitman wrote this song in 1977, asking for peace. It's sort of like a young boy singing about a dream that he had. And we're going to listen to the music. We're going to read the lyrics together and talk about the peace that he was asking for. By the way, this is 2 years, 1977, prior the first peace agreement that Israel made, which was with Egypt. So let's listen to Uzi Chitman, who is an amazing composer. He passed away in 2004. Amazing composer and musician, very influential in Israel, one of my favorites. Ratziti shetada, I wanted you to know.
אלוהים שלי, רציתי שתדע, חלום שחלמתי בלילה במיטה, ובחלום ראיתי מלאך, משמיים בא אליי ואמר לי כך, באתי משמיים, עברתי נדודים, לשאת ברכת שלום לכל הילדים, לשאת ברכת
Chitman describes those dreams, and he continues about this angel or a sailor that comes from sea with the gift of peace, but when he woke up, there was no peace. And a lot of this is a beautiful children-like song that all Israelis know. Like I said, as I was a young boy, I loved this song without really realizing its meaning.
Okay, so now we're going to a very different take on this song. So this is from years later in 2000. It's hard to pull it up.
2004.
Sorry, 2004, the 2000s. 2004, Hadag Nachash. You may have heard of them. They're a very, very famous hip hop band in Israel. And Hadag Nachash put this song out. I feel it's difficult to call it a cover because it is basically taking the song and dismantling it and putting it back together in a completely different way. I would say it's more of a homage to the song. First of all, when you hear it, your childhood is kind of destroyed. If you grow up on the song, you're like, what's going on? What's happened to the song? But when you really listen to it, first of all, I think it's so cool to take reference from something that so many of us grew up on and loved as kids. And the song originally with Uzi Chitman, as Shai said, has this innocence about it. It's a kid singing about a dream and speaking to God, and it's got such like beauty to it. And even though it's also speaking about the peace that he wishes for and wakes up to discover isn't there, it still has a lot of innocence in it. And this song is throwing all that out the window and saying, you know what? We think a little differently and time has passed and we're like, what's going on? And the interesting part about it is it starts off with, instead of Elohim Sheli Ratziti Sheteda, which is what Uzi Chitman said, they're using slang, and it's as if they're talking to God as a friend, and they're saying, Elohim ma inyanim, like, what's up, God? And it's just so like shocking to hear at the beginning. The other thing that's really interesting about this song, I feel, is that all the different instruments is so thought out. There's so much complexity. You know, a lot of people think, oh, hip hop is not like real music. It's not. It really is. They really took time to think about everything that goes into this song. Different instruments represent different characters and different motifs. So there's a sound that represents the angel. There's a sound that represents different sorts of developments in the song. And the verse that I really stood out to me when I was listening to the song and looking at the words is the last verse when they say, Elohim sheli ratziti sheteda שהשיר הזה נכתב לפני יותר מ-20 שנה. So, hey God, I want you to know that this song was written more than 20 years ago. And they're saying basically, wake us up from this dream already and send us a drop of peace. We really need it. So thanks very much. So we may feel that we're equal to all colors, genders, and races in the world. And that's also something that they take that wasn't said in the original song. And they say like, hey, this is what we think needs to be changed. And we love that Uzi Chitman was dreaming of this dream, but we have like a development to that dream. So you just heard the Uzi Chitman song. I hope that you remember what it sounded like, because now you're going to hear a reimagined version of it.
I will just add before we listen to it that the very last verse right before that, they say, Elohim sheli ratziti sheted'i, which is a female approach towards God, which is very, newer than the 70s. And of course, the approach for all colors, genders, and races in the world, more progressive than the 70s. Let's listen to the Hadag Nachash.
Shy? Uh-oh. Shy? Oh no. I think we may be having some technical difficulties. Shy?
So sorry. Can you hear me now?
Not very well. You're kind of cutting in and out. And you seem frozen.
Now?
No? Oh, hello? Okay, hi.
I'm so sorry. My internet is going crazy for some reason. I apologize. And we're going to be back in 2 seconds.
I was
I
going to stop pulling
apologize.
up the music instead.
Okay. Going back.
אלוהים, מה העניינים? יש לי משהו קטן לספר לך שרציתי שתדע. לא דבר גדול, זה חלום שחלמתי אמש בחושך בלילה במיטה. ובחלום, לא תאמין, בא אליי מלאך, הייתי בשוק מהקטע, נבלתי, פחדתי שאני אצרח, כי בכל זאת, זה לא קורה לי כל יום, לפגוש כרוב שאף עם כנפיים והכל. הוא היה קצת חיוור, היה לו גוף די גדול. לא משנה, בכל מקרה, שמע מה הוא אומר, שהוא בא מהשמיים, מהכוכבים, לשאת ברכת שלום לכל הילדים, מכל הצבעים, המינים והגזעים שבעולם. כמה ששמחתי בחלום, כל הפחד נעלם. אלוהים שלי, רציתי שתדע, חלום שחלמתי בלילה במיטה. אלוהים שלי, רציתי שתדע, חלום שחלמתי בלילה במיטה.
So very different from what you heard before with Uzi Chitman. But really, I think a powerful message. It was a powerful message in the 70s, and it was a powerful message with Hadag Nachash. And I just love it when artists take inspiration from other artists and from things. I think it always is more interesting to the audience when you recognize something, and it's just so cool to be like, hey, I remember that song. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So this song, Shir Tikva by Aviv Geffen, was released in 1996. So I don't think we planned this, that Yitzhak Rabin would come up so many times in our presentation today. But as you heard before, that was a very major event in Israel. And 96 was just after the assassination in 95. And Aviv Geffen was very much connected to Yitzhak Rabin, really admired him, really believed in his efforts for peace, and felt really devastated, of course, when he was assassinated. So Aviv Geffen wrote this song in his honor after he was killed. And the album cover, which we put here, is also very important, because first of all, you can see that it says, do you remember the 4th of November? So that there's no doubt here. Like if someone says, oh, maybe it's not about Rabin, it is definitely because of that date. The 4th of November is a date that most Israelis know that refers to Yitzhak Rabin. And I also add a sprinkle in a little extra thing here. And I haven't found actual evidence of this, but I think that also it's a reference to remember the 5th of November. And if you've heard of that before, that is a reference to Guy Fawkes. In England, at least, I heard about this story from my parents who grew up in England. So Guy Fawkes Day is a night that people do bonfires, but basically it is a story of militia basically that were trying to assassinate the king. And Guy Fawkes was the person that was put in charge of guarding the gunpowder underneath the parliament. and he was caught and captured, and then he confessed, of course, to the plan. And I do seem to see like a connection here, you know, like the king was threatened and Rabin was assassinated, and you know that there is a connection there. But the song is very important also to Israeli culture, I would say. It really did like color the whole 90s in a different color. So first of all, the fact that in the 90s, of course, there were the grunge bands, and Aviv Geffen is definitely associated with that style of music. He was also really, really inspired and influenced by John Lennon. So you will see when we play the music that the beginning of the song may sound really similar and remind you of Imagine. So like John Lennon, Aviv Geffen is also singing here for the hope of peace, and is wanting that we, you know, walk towards peace in the future. But unlike John Lennon, who is saying, imagine the peace, Aviv Geffen is saying, don't just imagine the peace, but go and work for it. Go and bring the peace and walk towards it. And that's why in the song they say, let's march to the dream. So don't just sit there imagining it, but go and do something about it. So let's listen to that first, and then I'll say a few more words. And you can see the footage as well.
בוא נצעד לחלום בלי גזע ולאום, בואו ננסה עד שיהיה טוב, עד שיהיה, נקבור את הערבים ולא את הילדים, אז בואו ננסה עד שיהיה טוב, עד שיהיה, בואו נצעד לחלום בלי גזע ולאום, בואו ננסה שיהיה טוב, עד שיהיה.
Okay. So also at the beginning of the clip, you see that it says, dedicated to those who forgot how to love. And again, he's writing this in a place that he feels really devastated and very much down, and is still hopeful though for the peace that can come at the end of the rainbow kind of thing. And yes, we put a little comparison between John Lennon and Aviv Geffen, and definitely you can see his influence from him. And yeah, and then another thing that is different from, you could hear that the beginning piano part is similar to Imagine when it starts off just with the chords of the piano. But what Aviv Geffen did is he took it also a step further and just kept adding melodically to the song. So he added more and more instruments. He added the drums, he added the whole band. And that also kind of shows you that he's not just talking about, let's wish for it, but he's saying, this is going somewhere. We are going somewhere with the music, and we are going somewhere together, and we're going to get to the piece. So I think that's also cool when you think about the thought that goes into writing the melodies and writing the songs as well.
Absolutely. And with that, we are moving to a different section, a section that's important in Israel's culture so much, Talia.
Yep. So some of you may remember that I spoke about the Eurovision on one of the Friday nights. As you know, every Friday night I have like a little corner. I do my little spiel about Israel in some respects or another. And one of the weeks I did speak about the Eurovision. I spoke about the different winners of the show that is called Hakochav Haba LaEurovision, which is how you choose in the past few years. That's how you choose who represents us in the Eurovision. And I also spoke about the Shalva band in that context. But we are now going to be speaking about some of the highlights throughout the years. So Eurovision, I know some people might think it's weird. Israel is not in Europe. How come it is in the Eurovision Song Contest? But we were allowed to join in 1973. Is that right? Yeah, 1973. That's when we joined. And I'm sure you've heard Israelis speaking about the Eurovision a lot because it means a lot to us. We love going, we love representing Israel. And I think everyone just loves to have something to rally behind and to feel very patriotic about. Of course, when we lose, we usually say it's anti-Semitism, but when we win, we're very proud and we're very happy. And I remember in 2018 when we won that the whole of Tel Aviv went into the fountains in Kikar, now it's called Kikar Rabin, of course, but everyone went into the fountains and celebrated. So it's a huge, huge moment for Israelis.
Absolutely. Now, I will just add that the Eurovision itself started in 1956 after the European countries decided that after Second World War, they need to come together in some way. That's not only peace agreements and summits and things like that. So they decided to create a culture. This is the biggest musical event in the world. 230 million people watch it every year. And Israel, as Talia said, started participating in 1973. Our first win was in 1978 when the Eurovision was held in Paris. Every year, the country that wins hosts the next one, the next event, next year's event. So in Paris, we won with Abani B, which is a song about Sfat Habet, the language of Bet, where we add the letter Bet to every vowel or every syllable. So Abani B means Ani, A-Ba-Ni B. So the song talks about that, a very cute, fun, poppy song.
Basically it means I love you. Ani ohev
Abani B, Oboebev, Obotabach, Ani ohev otach. This is how, as kids, we used to hide and speak in a secret language, Sfat Habet. So after winning 1973, the Eurovision made it to Jerusalem, and we had a double home run when we won with another wonderful song that you might know, Hallelujah. 1979, we won again. However, we couldn't host 2 years in a row. The financial burden is huge, and also all the committees and everything said we're not going to do that. And then we had a dry spell of many, many years until 1998, where in England, Dana International won with the song Diva. This was an amazing moment, mostly because Dana International was the first transgender to appear on the Eurovision and win first place. It got her a lot of international exposure, but also placing Israel at the forefront of LGBTQ plus communities in many ways. Before we move to our last victory, I want to take us a step back to 1983. This song, Chai, did not win. It did come a very high place, but 1983 was a different kind of victory for Israel with this song. This was in Munich, the land, on the land of Germany, where an Israeli delegation came to sing a song at the Eurovision. Just to remind you that in Munich in 1972, there was a massacre of 11 Israeli athletes at the Olympics. So once we knew that we're going to be attending the Eurovision in Munich, Ehud Manor, who is one of the greatest song writers in Israel, decided he's going to write a song that talks about the pride and the survival of the Jewish people, and he called it Chai. Shim'u Chai, Ani Od Chai. Hear, my brethren, I'm still alive. And sending a song of that force that says Am Yisrael Chai on Germany, on German land, was a victory on itself. Ofra Chaza, who sang the song, who was the lead singer, was dressed in white, representing innocence and peace, but also, the future and the bright hope, where backup dancers were dressed in yellow and red. yellow representing the yellow Jewish patch that Jews had to wear during the Holocaust time. And the red represents the blood. We can see flowers, but they're more similar to blood stains on the dresses. So from being victims to a hopeful life of Am Yisrael Chai was a true victory of Israel in that Eurovision. And in 2018, we won with Toy, a wonderful, amazing song after we have not won for 20 years. Doron Medali, an amazing songwriter, created the song with Stav Beger, a very upbeat song that comes and talks about, I'm not your toy, representing and kind of corresponding, going back and forth with the Me Too movement of the time, talking about women's liberation from the hands of men in many ways, and the strength of women in that way.
So it was actually a very serious message, but sort of hidden in a very poppy, very light-hearted song. Another thing that was interesting about this song is, first of all, it was the second most watched Eurovision clip on the Eurovision official website. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then once it was released, it was actually leaked in advance, but once it was released officially, a lot of people said that it was the front runner for winning. So that there was a lot of pressure on Netta representing Israel. She felt that pressure going into it, but also I think that everyone was kind of rallying behind her and saying, you know, she's not only representing female empowerment, but she's also representing like a different kind of woman. You know, it's not like just the pop star that is like scantily dressed and all that. Like, she was representing different type of women out there singing. Another thing is that it was played 148 times on the radio after it won in Israel. And that broke the record of the most times being played around Israel. And it was played 256 times in Europe, and was the first Israeli song to be on the iTunes charts, which just a few fun facts that I like to know. And I think we can skip this one because I'm sure you've all heard it before. And we're gonna skip ahead to our one before last slide because we're already kind of cutting it close with time. But these are just some to kind of summarize. We skipped over Mima Makim, which is an Idan Reichel song. And again, I'm sure a lot of you know that song as well, and how important the Ethiopian influence was on Idan Reichel, and how the Ethiopian Aliyah to Israel was very important. But maybe we'll do another session on that. And these are just a little taste of some of the Israeli artists that are so important to Israeli culture. And I think that if we wanted to try and get everyone in, we just wouldn't have any room.
And more of that, these are all internationally recognized and famous in many ways. Mike Brandt, who made it in the 70s, Idan Reichel, who we all know, Statik and Benel, who we're going to listen to in a minute, Asaf Avidan, Achinoam Nini, who you might know as Noah, Ofra Chaza, who we mentioned before, and so many others.
Yeah, and also the cool thing, for example, about Ofra Chaza, she was the dubbing voice, the singing voice in The Prince of Egypt, which I know I grew up on, and a lot of us have seen many times. But she wasn't just in the Israeli version; she was in the American version as well. So she can be heard all over the world singing and representing Israel so well.
Which, by the way, her musical international career started after representing Israel in the Eurovision in 1983.
Right.
But as Talia mentioned, we have a lot of other influences in music in Israel that we could have, if we had more time, talk about Ethiopian music and the music of the Arab population in Israel that takes a big place, and so many other versions of variations of Israeli music. But it will just take us about 4 hours to cover and not just one.
And one more of the groups here that I think is also interesting. Yeah. Ewa, they actually came out with a really famous song that took Israel by storm called Habib Galabi. And that is a song in Yemenite language. And it's really cool to hear that and hear all those influences from everyone. Everyone in Israel, of course, comes from different places, right? We are kibbutz galuyot, as we like to say, that we come from different corners of the earth and we all come together and share our multiculturalism. And I think that this slide really shows that, you know, they're all Israeli, they're all representing Israeli music, but they all have different influences, different cultural backgrounds, and different music styles. And it's so cool that in this tiny little country, we have so many music styles and so many things, and yet they can be very distinct and very sort of, you can hear it and say, oh, that's Israeli music, of course. And even if they don't sound alike, you can recognize that it is.
Absolutely. And to kind of wrap it all together, there is a wonderful song that came out a few years back. And if we talked about how the stars were made through the military bands, and how the stars were then made through the cassettes, grassroots up, or then with reality shows like The Voice, The X Factor, Kochav Nolad, the Israeli star that started the reality shows in Israel, Kochav Haba L'Eurovision, all those. Another way that stars become stars these days is through the internet, through YouTube. And this duo, Statik and Benel, are two of the biggest stars in Israel these days. They have not even released one album so far since, I think, around 2015, but they are the biggest stars, and it all started on YouTube. So this song we chose to bring to kind of wrap it all together, because it talks about what Israelis like. And they say that eventually, at the end of the day, what Israelis like in music is bass, v'silsulim, the Mizrahi trills that we heard beforehand. And they, with Zohar Gov, and they bring a mashup with Statik. His name is Liraz Russo, who we'll see with the classes, who brings the hip hop to this, and Ben El Tavori, who brings the Mizrahi sound to the song. And we're going to listen to that and then kind of sum everything up for us before we leave.
אין לנו איביזה, אין הרבה בוויזה, אבל יש את הבריזה של אילת והכנרת. אז אם אתה מרגיש שחם, תתארגן על הטובר בגד ים. אין עוד קיץ כזה במדינה אחרת. אז בוא נשים את כל הבעיות בצד, ביחד נלמד אותם אחד אחד, שמה שמדבר אל הישראלים זה בסה עם סלסולים. נכון, המקום הכי חם במזרח התיכון, מדינה קטנה, סתכלו סביב, יש ביג בלגן בתל אביב. חולים על מעולים, ועפים איך שהביט נכנס, הקצב של הבאסים יעשה לך בראש קרקס. ועד מתי באמצע המדבר לא צריך עוד שום דבר, אז אני שם.
And that symbolizes, they sing about Cholim al Ma'awalim. We love the Ma'awalim, those musical Mizrahi trills. And when the bass comes in, you know, it kind of drives us crazy.
Yeah.
And
that is I think a great note to end on, because that song really does talk about all the trends and all those things. A nice fun fact also is that they just released recently a song with the Black Eyed Peas and with Pitbull. And I have to say that I actually only recently discovered about the Black Eyed Peas one, but I think a lot of Israelis just were mind blown when we heard Will I Am of the Black Eyed Peas say the word in Hebrew, mishpucha, when he was singing, and everyone was like, whoa, he's talking in Hebrew. So it is cool that they have like crossed over the ocean and have now collaborated with really world-renowned American artists. And just the fact also, you know, that they combine like pop and Mizrahi music in such a way that speaks to all generations. And even in American summer camps. Shai and myself worked so many summers in American summer camps. And Static and Benel, every time they have a hit, usually around the summertime, it becomes the anthem of the camp. All these little American kids know all the words. And it's really fun, you know, like Zahav and Tudu Bom and all these things. Who knew that American kids would love Israeli music so much? So, yeah. With that, we will be summing up and saying, first of all, thank you so much to Shai. What a treat. I'm just so thrilled, A, that I get to introduce you to my community, B, that you get to share your knowledge and love for music with us, and just that I get to spend Yom Ha'atzmaut with you, even if it's online. It's just a pleasure. And thank you everyone for joining us for your evening. We really appreciate it. And Chag Sameach.
I will say that
Talia.
the
Thank you,
pleasure is
Talia.
all mine. And before we leave, we actually, if you love Israeli music,
right.
we have two wonderful sessions coming up that Talia can email everyone afterwards with the details.
Yeah.
One is this upcoming Sunday at 11 a.m. A special session I host Doron Medali. Doron Medali, I call him the architect of Israeli music these days. He wrote the song Toy that won the Eurovision in 2018. And he's been involved in the past 20 years in the music industry tremendously. And he's going to talk about some of the things that we heard here today, but a lot more. And on April 22nd, it's a Thursday, we have a wonderful session with Jimbo J. Jimbo J is a hip-hop Israeli musician who we're hosting. Is going to talk about his creations. And
yeah, so I
we're
put
looking forward to seeing you.
In the chat, I put the link to all the Israeli programs on the Bnei Tzedek website, so that you can see the 22nd, which is exactly a week from tonight, is all the Federation Shlichim coming together for a masterclass. And then after that, you will receive a podcast that yours truly edited. So you can see that on the website. And at the bottom, if you scroll down, you'll see Shai's Doron Medali event as well. I put that on our website. So please join us. And also stay tuned for the Wonder Women of Israel program that Shai and I have collaborated on as well with the JCC in Rockville. And that the next speaker is coming up on the 25th of April. So Sunday, 10 o'clock. She's amazing. She's a female director and a filmmaker, and she's done such amazing things. So really you should join us for that as well. I actually can put the link in for that too. Let me find that. Here it is. Everything's always open on my computer, so that's easy. I'm putting that in the chat as well. Oh, I just realized that I put it everyone in the waiting room instead of everyone in meeting. Okay, so that is the Wonder Women of Israel, and that is the Israel programs. So now you have those, but I can also email you.
Yeah, so just make sure to click it so it opens up on your screens before you leave. Otherwise, you're going to lose those things. Thank you so much for hosting me tonight. It was a pleasure. And Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach. We're still celebrating.
Yay! Here, I'll turn my thing on again. Bye!
Laila Tov.
Yay!
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Great program. Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of fun.
Thanks, Stan. Always a pleasure.